Hello, and thank you for listening to Queer Legends and Oral History Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Dern. I want to share a bit of a conversation with you that I had with Concordia University professor Karen Herland about a year ago about the 5th International AIDS Conference that was held in the city in 1989. That Montreal conference became a legendary moment for people living with HIV and AIDS, and it impacted AIDS research and healthcare around the world. Herland was a big part of it, and she led the group Réaction Sida. They literally rolled out the welcome mat for global AIDS activists, and then they took over the conference. This is how they did it. I'm very curious about how you anarchists, I use the big air quotation marks, suddenly swoop in and are basically trying to save people's lives because nobody else is really organized yet.
Well, I mean, the first time I went to an anarchist conference in Toronto, I asked myself that same question. What are we doing here? I mean, the long and short of it was I knew the HIV AIDS conference was coming here in 89 in June. And just, parenthetically, ironically, it's coming again next year. So there's that to think about. It'll be in Montreal next year.
They did note the original protest, too, in their announcement, which I found pretty interesting.
Which I tweeted immediately. They weren't that happy about us then. So it's great that we're part of the PR now. But whatever. So I knew the conference was coming. And I don't know if you listened to the interview that I did for the AIDS History Project.
I haven't listened to it, but I've read most of it. So I'm aware of sort of like you realized it was coming and you're like, okay, let's get our shit together.
Yeah, I mean, it was very much a combination of we have to capital D-O do something, and I am entirely naive about what the scale and scope and what's involved in quote unquote doing something. So it was literally 3 months before the conference, I think, sometime in late February or early March of that year, where I was like, we have to do something. And my idea of do something was like, literally, we have to have information available for people who come, and we have to, like, I don't know, have snacks or maybe places they can sleep. It was nothing. Like, I didn't know what I was getting into at all, but I knew two things. I knew that that a whole bunch of people were going to be coming and they would want information and support. And like, I speak of the non-professional, like not the doctors and the researchers people. And I knew that one woman alone wasn't going to be much of a welcoming committee. So the first thing I did was I called my friend Eric Smith. As a student, I had been part of the student press, and I had been the editor of the student paper at Concordia, and Eric had similar roles at the student paper at McGill. So that's how I knew him. He was involved in student press at McGill, and he was a gay man, and I knew him and his partner. And I just called him and I said, this is happening. We should do something. And he agreed immediately. And we just started to brainstorm. And I don't remember the specifics of everything that we did besides getting the word out in a sort of pre-internet time. But I know we started to have meetings, and we used the space above the anarchist bookstore just because it was empty and accessible. In retrospect, 2 flights of stairs is not accessible, but near a metro was accessible.
Let's talk about this pre-internet thing. It's been mentioned a lot, but I don't think anyone really grasps what we had to do as people and as a community back then, because it's not such a simple matter of let's create a Facebook event, let's go create blank event, boom, and spread it on social. What were you doing to get the word out?
That's a great question. What were we doing? I think about this when I'm going to skip ideas right now, and I hope that you can make sense of it later. But I have looked at the Gay and Lesbian Archives collection around Sex Garage, and there's a whole lot of paper in there. And I'm reading this paper, and I'm laughing at multiple things. I'm laughing at the fact that I don't remember half of it, even though my name is signed it. I'm laughing that we literally, after it happened, after the police raid at the party and the subsequent protests, the police actions that resulted in several dozen arrests, we prepared, this is to answer your question, we prepared little half-page slips of paper where people that were typed, mind you, where people could fill in by hand, name, phone number, what happened to them, i.e. it was X at night and I was told to do this, I was hit, I was dragged, whatever subsequent fallout there might have been from that. I had to go to the hospital, I couldn't work for a day, whatever, I got arrested. And then at the end of this little thing this slip of paper that we handed out to people was my phone number. If if you want to know more, or if you want to talk about this, or if you need resources, call. And the hilarious thing about all of this is I have the same phone number to this day. So that's what it was. It was word of mouth. It was passing papers around. It was phone trees. Lord help us, phone trees. And that's what it was. It was really that. And I mean, there was a little bit of internet, but there wasn't enough, and there weren't enough people, and it wasn't, like you said, there was no Facebook, there was no central, we all go here and do this thing. That was not going to happen.
What did happen is that by the time delegates arrived for the opening of the 1989 International AIDS Conference, Herland and Réaction Sida had backup from fellow activists from the AIDS Committee of Toronto, ACT UP New York, and others from around the world. The conference was all over the news, and it was a huge deal.
I remember we were there, and then it was just like, it just happened. Someone said, we're going in, and we were just on the escalators. And my best friend, Sally, who lives in New Zealand now, Sally is also 6 feet tall. And at the time, Sally had her hair was very bleached and very teased and kind of dreaded. So it added a good 6 inches. And she was on roller skates, not roller blades, like old fashioned lace up roller skates. And so there's footage of her going up the escalator that is hilarious because she's just towering over everybody, right? Like everybody. And we got in and we got to the front and we just stood, like we just took over the stage. And then Tim's also an amazing guy. Tim ended up opening the conference on behalf of people living with HIV, which is still written about as a transformative moment to sort of shift from the scientist, official, professional perspective to a user-based, nothing about us without us kind of point of view is like critical to that year and that experience. And I remember at one point, I can't remember quite how it happened, but I think we started to chant, "Join us." And this huge group of researchers and politicians and whoever goes to these things, I don't even know, vendors, doctors. I don't think that many literally came to the stage, but hundreds of people in that room stood and started cheering with us. So that was important. That was good. And I think a lot about, like, we joke about how not wired or, how internet unfriendly this period was, but it was also like zero security. I got a press pass because me and my 2 friends, or 3 friends, one of whom is an amazing New York-based artist now named Zoe Leonard. We had a zine called Bevy of Anarchist Feminists, BOA. And we literally got press passes because of our zine, right? So we all got free, complete access to the whole conference.
I remember reading this in your interview.
Yeah, and which, I mean, insane. And then I think we also were like photocopying and coloring in passes so other people could have them too. Like ridiculous.
Has it sunk in as to how incredibly important you are to the rights movement in this province?
Well, I mean, there were things I did and there were things I didn't do. I like teaching this stuff. I like being able to talk about this in my classrooms. You know, I do a course about HIV/AIDS. I do a queer theory class. I do other courses where I can tell some of these stories, not as stories about me, but as stories about what is possible and what is necessary at times. And I feel like that's important. And also, like this project. Also, as you said earlier, this history can't be lost. This history needs to be shared and passed on.
I'm going to continue to do my part to share queer history, and I want to thank you for listening. There are more new episodes coming soon, and this Queer Legends Quickie is a Secret Agents production, researched, written, recorded, and produced by me, Sean Dern. The executive producer is Ian Capstick. Queer Legends, an oral history podcast, is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Player FM, and wherever you go for great storytelling.